Thanksgiving days may recall that one of my favorite little stories to introduce a homily is taken from the long-running cartoon The Simpsons. A number of years back, one of their first Thanksgiving episodes, they're all gathered around the table, and Bart, the son, is asked to do the grace. And as he's saying grace, he says, well, you know, I don't know why we're really thanking you, because we did all the work for this, and so I guess thanks for nothing. And the family, of course, is horrified, and about that time, then Lisa and Bart get into a tug of war over the cornucopia that she made on the table, and it ends up flying into the fireplace. It kind of finishes the ruination of Thanksgiving Day. But I mentioned that because I think for a number of people, especially as how our country and our world have gone, to be thankful to God on Thanksgiving Day in our country, or back in October in Canada, the beginning of the month of October, when they celebrate Thanksgiving. There are a lot of people who I think really do kind of feel that sentiment of Bart Simpson, that, you know, well, thanks God, I guess, but, you know, we've done all the work, you know, we till the fields, and we harvested all the crops, and we raise the animals, and we prepare the food, and we do all of this, and we do all of that, and we spend the money to have this. So, you know, what part do you have in this? And it's because they never go far enough to think back far enough of where everything comes from. And even when some people do that, they're likely to say, well, you know, because of evolution, these things happened, you know, and they've just sort of happened by you know, natural selection. They've happened by certain kinds of development within the world and nature. You know, there's no reason to really posit that there's a God behind any of this. But when we, as people of faith, come to a day like today, we have to give a different response, and that's why we're here in the church today, instead of already watching football or starting to, you know, nibble at what we're supposed to be waiting for later on, or still in bed, whatever, you know, we might be doing otherwise. It's that we realize, just like our ancestors in the faith, our Jewish brothers and sisters realized, that God is the one who has given everything there is. And God is the one who lies behind everything that we experience in this life. And by that I mean, when we look around just this place today, the church here, it's obvious that all of this was built by human hands. But the inspiration to build this church was from God. There may have been egos that entered into how it was going to be, and how it would be decorated, and what shape it was going to take, and all of that. But the deepest feeling that lies behind it, and how it's been maintained in all of these years, is the fact that it was God who inspired in these people the need to have a place of encounter, so that we could meet with God and God with us in one place together as a people. But also, when we think about just the country that we have, this country came about in a sense by, look by like happenstance or accident, because of those who left the old world and came to the new world here, and came to this part of the new and uncharted world rather than other parts of the world that had already been more examined and were being settled. And so those Puritans, those nonconformists from England who came here, found a place where they could organize themselves and be mindful of all the things that existed in the land around them, and eventually would come to this awareness that it was God who not only led them and helped them, but helped them also to learn what it meant to cultivate a new land, what it meant to eat foods that maybe they were not acquainted with before, what it offered to them to sustain life, and not just to sustain it, but to thrive in it. They understood that because that was their frame of reference. They came from an attitude of faith. And so when they looked around and then they began to do the work they needed to do just to survive, and then when they were aided by the native population, they had every opportunity then to thank their Creator, thank their Lord, thank the one who provided all that was there, that just didn't fall out of the sky, that just didn't happen, but that was created, that was made. And that they, from their perspective of faith, could recognize that and give praise and thanks to God because of it. And that's really the legacy that's been handed down in our culture, to thank God on this day for the generosity that God has shown to us in giving us all of this. And also for the wisdom that's been given of how those resources and the abilities and everything else that we are graced with have been used. It's not to say that we have always done things the best way, that people today will make an issue out of how it really was a conquest by the people who came from overseas to the lands that were already occupied by the native population, and how they exploited and how it was kind of racist and all kinds of stuff. Just earlier this morning, just to have some background noise while I was preparing a few things, I originally turned on this one program where a man went to a college campus and was set up a booth and said, "Prove to me that Thanksgiving is a racist event." Because I don't believe that it is. It's that kind of stuff that's going on, that when we get distracted by those kinds of details and those sorts of interpretations, that we again distance ourselves more and more from the God who is the giver of all good gifts, the God who is the giver of everything, and who gave it out of love for this humanity that he created. The reading from Deuteronomy this morning goes to some length to detail how this first offering of the first fruits is supposed to be done. But that it was supposed to be done became crystal clear, because there needed to be an acknowledgement of what God had given, the abilities that God gave to them to do the farming, to know what to do with the land, to know the kind of crops to plant, and how to harvest them, how to use them as food, and how to do everything. All of that was something that they had to learn. They had to discover and then rediscover as their history went on. And so, as a result of having been exiles in Egypt and then led through the desert for those 40 years to the promised land, once they got to where they were supposed to go back to in the first place, the land that God originally gave to them. They needed to remember who it was that they disobeyed that led to their having to go away in the first place. And then their liberation with Moses leading them back through the desert. And then coming into that promised land again, the land flowing with milk and honey, the land flowing with all the good things that God wanted his people to have. That they had to make sure that they never forgot who gave it to them. I think that's one of the reasons why this country of ours, with our history, with our origins, etc., have this day institutionalized. They may have moved around a little bit over the course of a couple of centuries, but ended up now on the fourth Thursday of November every year, the day to be specially set aside in thanksgiving to God for everything that God has given to this nation. And we who profess the Christian faith, we who are understanding of the nature of the gift we've received, are given this grand opportunity as a nation to offer praise and thanks to God. Some people do it by worship. Some people do it just by being grateful for the food around the table. But there are plenty of those who see in the gathering of the family together and spending that time with family and friends and the love that's there, that is a principal reason why we gather together at this day. But for those of us who know this by faith, that this is just a natural kind of instinct that we ought to have, not just once a year, but every day. One of the reasons why we celebrate the Eucharist on this day, why it's a feast in our prayer book, and why other Christian denominations have the liturgical texts and celebrate the Day of Thanksgiving, is because we understand what we have to be grateful for. In the gospel today, Jesus challenges those people that were chasing him down because he confronts them directly. He said, "You're not following me because you want life. You're following me because you got a free lunch. You had your fill of the loaves when I performed that miracle on the hillside with the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. You ate until you couldn't eat anymore. That's why you're following me around. You want to see what meal I'm going to produce next. Give us this bread always." In other words, do something for us so that we won't be hungry again. And Jesus takes that sentiment and takes it to the next level by saying, "I am the bread that came down from heaven. So that if you eat of this bread," and as the chapter develops, "and you drink, you will have eternal life. You'll have the Son of the flesh of the Son of Man, the blood of the Son of Man, that's going to be your food and your drink and your sustenance." Because it's that sacrifice that ultimately redeemed the human race. It's that giving of Christ himself on the cross that should awaken in us continuously our prayer of thanks to God, thanking the Lord for saving the human race, thanking the Lord for saving us, for delivering us from the power of sin and suffering and death, from delivering us from our egotistical ways of thinking and acting, and our self-centeredness and our lack of gratitude to God and to others for what has been done, what has been given, and the abilities we have to do for others. So today, as we celebrate around the table with the various foods, when we spend time with family and friends, we do so mindful that it was the gift of God who gave all of these things, all these created things, that we enjoy and make it possible for us today to be together, to have food to share, to have company to share, and that all that we have and all that we are ultimately is God's gift to us. And that on Thanksgiving Day we give special thanks for the way this country of ours has been blessed, and down through all of the 2 centuries plus that our nation has been in existence. But also that we be grateful daily for everything that we have. And to ask the Lord always to make us mindful of just how blessed we are. And as he gives himself to us in Holy Communion today, as once he gave himself for us on the cross, let's be especially grateful for the gift of life and salvation that we have through him.